Okay.
Can you state your name for us?
I'm Hannah Schell, Schell.
How do you, oh, you already said your name. How long have you worked in the Weeks house?
I think we've been here for about 4 years, I think. So, that's about right.
Can you tell us about Stafford Weeks?
Sure. Stafford was a very gentle man. I think of him as kind of a Renaissance man because he was a musician and a great teacher, somebody who loved to travel, somebody who was widely read. By the time I met him in 2001, he had retired actually after already for a while, but I met him because he would come to campus events. If we would have a speaker on campus, Stafford was there in the audience, and it was clear that he was still very engaged in issues of religion and philosophy. So he just was a tremendous, tremendous human being.
Is there an interesting fact about Stafford Weeks that you have discovered?
Oh, well, I wasn't really aware that he was a musician until actually at his funeral. But he was a part of Monmouth's Dixieland band, and I believe he played a horn. He either played the trumpet or maybe a trombone. I can't remember. So the rest of the band actually played at his funeral. And the fact that he was a musician was a big part of people's memories of him. So that was just a side that I had never seen. And I just thought that was really kind of a neat part. Because, I mean, he was a professor and he was a dean, and at one point he was the chaplain, but he had lots of sides to him, so.
Why do you believe Stafford Weeks is considered a local hero?
Oh, well, when we've had alums back on campus from several decades ago, they talk about just how important he was in their lives. So I think he's on par with Doc Kieft and other professors who had long careers here and influenced many, many students. I think because he and Winifred lived here in Monmouth for such a long time, they had a big impact on a lot of local organizations outside of the college. I think he was a local hero because of the kind of person that he had all these different sides to him, but actually more importantly because of the fact that he was just a very sort of generous and patient person and a gentle person, would sort of sit and really listen to you. So he had all of these talents, but he always kind of made himself available for other people. That was the impression I had just of the few times that I interacted with him. So,
if Stafford Weeks was still alive, what do you think he would be doing?
Oh, well, he probably would still be in the library reading and coming to concerts and lectures and things. I hope that he would actually hang out on Fridays at our Meaning of Life conversations. That would be fantastic for us and for the students, I think. If he could still play music, he would still be playing music. I think if he were feeling able to dance, he and Winifred would dance. I saw them dance together at a fundraiser for the Y a few years before he passed away, and they could really cut a rug. And apparently that was, Winifred talked about how when they were dating it probably would have been in the 40s, sort of doing the jitterbug and these different dances was just a big part of their life. I think he would be still doing all of those things. So.
Is there a fun story that you have shared with Stafford Weeks that you would like to share?
That I shared with him?
Or
about him. Well, actually, something that happened that he found funny, and so it's really his story that he loved to tell, but it is a funny story. After we dedicated the house and had already been here for about a year, but the house kind of said Weeks House on it, because he and Winifred actually just live around the corner, he would pass the house regularly if he came to campus. And I guess one day it had been raining, and so there was some mud outside the house, and he actually slipped. So this was a man, I think he was probably in his 80s at that point. He slipped and fell in the mud. He didn't hurt himself, but he said he was laying there in the mud looking up at this house that has his name on it, and it was just this perfect moment of total humility, right? You're just completely embarrassed and you slipped in the mud and you're a mess, and then sort of having this house that had his name on it, and he just thought that was funny, and it was so captured who Stafford was. He was not arrogant at all. He would never brag about himself. He probably was both thrilled and probably a little bit uncomfortable that we named the house after him. I'm really, really glad that we did that before he passed, so that he knew and that Winifred knows that there will be this part of campus that people will come back to and associate with him. But I always thought that was a funny story, so the Stafford in the mud. But anyway, so is that the kind of thing you meant? Or so? Okay, good.
Is there anything you would like to add before the conclusion of the interview?
Oh, I guess another fond memory I have of both Stafford and Winifred is Sue Holm, who was the senior member of Modern Foreign Language when I arrived at Monmouth, and had taught here for a long time. Actually remarried, so she got married, this was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. No, it must be longer than that, 7 or 8 years ago. And so her wedding was at a Unitarian church in Peoria. And so a whole bunch of faculty from Monmouth were going to the wedding. And I can't remember how this came about, but my husband Martin and I agreed that we would drive Stafford and Winifred to the wedding, just to sort of carpool. And so they piled into the back of our Honda Element, which is not an easy car to get in and out of. And the four of us got to spend the hour together driving to Peoria. And they just were so delightful, and part of the conversation, because we were going to a wedding, was kind of their thoughts on what makes for a good marriage. And it was sort of the funny things about, you have to agree that your spouse is always right, and but really Martin and I came away just really inspired by them, that they had a genuine love for each other. They had been through a lot together. I think part of their sort of philosophy was, don't stay mad at each other, don't go to bed angry, and you could just see that that really had actually worked for them. It wasn't just this saccharine advice, it really was kind of practical. And so I treasure that ended up happening that way, that we got to spend that time with them. So.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. I enjoy talking about him. He was really a terrific human being. I guess one thing I'll add is about his funeral. And I've now been to enough funerals in my life. Sometimes they're actually kind of horrible and don't capture the sense of the person for various reasons. But Stafford's funeral, which was here at Faith Presbyterian, was, if you can say this, a beautiful funeral. The church was packed. His daughters were there. People were, of course, sad. He had lived a long life, and it was really a celebration of his life. And the fact that the Dixieland Band was there, and they actually played a cassette tape of Stafford playing the horn, and so that was great, because we got to sort of hear him, and people sang, and there was different remembrances, but the band played "Oh, When the Saints Go Marching In," and just something about the liveliness and sort of the good energy of the funeral really captured at least the glimpse that I had of who Stafford was, and just kind of piecing together who he was as a father. His daughters had some pretty funny stories, and then other remembrances of him. And so, it was a great funeral because it captured him as a person. And it actually was a great funeral. My husband Martin went with me. He didn't know Stafford, really. But he came away really inspired to sort of like, I want to live a full life. This is what it means to live a good life. That's a pretty fantastic funeral, to come away with that feeling. And that's totally because of the kind of person Stafford was. So anyway, thanks. Thanks for the chance to talk about him. So anyway, okay. Did you get